Hi, I'm Alexandra Lemay and this is Low Tech Garden. Today we're going to talk about how to create an all-in-one fertilizer that will meet most of your plant's nutritious needs. If you guessed compost, you guessed right. However, most of us who had any experience composting realize that one type can differ from another greatly. For example, if you live somewhere in New Zealand on 100 acres and have a bunch of grass-fed, pasture-raised animals that produce high-quality organic manure, you do not have to worry about a fertilizer that much. However, if you're like myself, a suburban dweller with a small backyard and no permission to raise chickens and an HOA, you have to become pretty creative. So today I will share with you a recipe that's been working pretty well for my plants. Now I'm ready to mix my compost pile. Right here I have my carbon-rich materials, mainly dried out Bermuda grass clippings mixed with oak leaves that were broken into smaller pieces by a mower. And here I have my nitrogen-rich materials, a bucket filled with kitchen scraps and a smaller bucket of urine. I also have some rainwater and some compost that has already been cooked and filled with beneficial microbes. I have some terratonic soil activator with humic acid that also benefits those microbes. I have some biochar that provides living quarters for those microbes. I like to add rock dust. This particular one is called Minerals Plus, mixed with lava rock that instead of adding separately, I add that to my compost, and that helps to feed my plants and my vegetables. I add beef bone broth bones directly to my compost. I put them in the middle of the pile and never had any issues with small animals digging in, because those bones do get very, very hot in the middle of the pile. They provide calcium. They slowly leach out calcium. As you see at the very end, there is a bone that I just picked out from one of the vegetable beds. It's been in the ground for about 6 months and slowly leaching out calcium. Speaking of calcium, I also add my eggshells directly to the compost pile and let them pre-decompose before I add them as a fertilizer. And this is a pile that I started a little over 3 weeks ago using not quite the same but very similar recipe, and I'm going to use it to add additional fertilizer to this vegetable bed. And this vegetable bed is actually built using a very similar recipe as well. So I keep adding the nourishment. As you see, it's mid-May here, but we already have some nice little cucumbers coming in, as well as some zucchinis and squashes. So I guess the medium works for my vegetables from that same recipe. Today, the cutting edge of agriculture is not only to grow organic produce, but to grow the produce that is nutritionally dense. So how do we get there? How do we grow nutritionally dense, high-quality organic produce? The most obvious and natural way is to have healthy soil. What is healthy soil? What makes healthy soil? Well, there are several different components. Today we'll focus only on the most obvious ones, like organic matter that will feed your plants and feed beneficial microorganisms. Mineral content. Your plants need variety of different minerals to be healthy. Microorganism activity that will break down those minerals and will help the plants to absorb them. Structure of your soil. You want your soil to retain water, but in the same time not to drown the roots of the plants. Aeration. Most plants need air not only for their leaves but for their roots as well as beneficial microorganisms. Most of them are aerobic and require oxygen to function properly. How do we get to healthy soil? What do we need to do to have healthy soil? The same thing, there are several different ways of create healthy soil, and I'll mention a couple of them briefly, but we'll focus on compost later on. Plant symbiosis. As you know, today's agriculture is dominated by monocrops, thousands of acres of corn, soybean, and stuff like that. However, there is more and more conversation about permaculture, food systems, symbiotic relationships between different plants growing all together in harmony and benefiting each other and keeping the soil healthy. Another one is water management. There is no water, there is no life, there is no healthy soil. But today we're talking about compost. As you saw earlier, there were several ingredients that I used in my compost, as I call it all-in-one compost. Of course, most of you who compost are familiar with carbon-rich materials like dry leaves and wood chips, and nitrogen-rich materials like animal manure, human urine, kitchen scraps. Of course, you don't want to use any dog or cat feces. They're filled with parasites and it's just not worth the risk. Water, again, is absolutely necessary for the composting process to take place. Another one you saw, I used an activator, something that already contains a bunch of beneficial microbes that will continue multiplying in your compost and breaking down those elements. And you can use already existing, fresh, already cooked compost. You could use some dirt, and also to boost everything, you could use a soil activator. As you saw, I had this locally produced Ladybug organic fertilizer, organic soil tonic that contains humic acid and seaweed and will just boost the production of those microorganisms. I used about half a cup, so this big jar lasts me about I guess a year or even more. I think it expires after a year, so it's better to use it within a year. Another one, minerals. You saw me using some rock dust. I used about a bag like this per pile, and that cost only $7.99. Has lava rock and rock dust as well in this small batch. So, but also for my minerals, you saw me using some already cooked bones that will slowly leach calcium into the soil. If I lived on acreage, I probably would crush them or burn them or something like that to facilitate the absorption. But again, living in suburbs, I'm limited to what I can do. You can use fish, and you can use eggshells for calcium as well to add to your compost for minerals. Another one is porous material. This is a new thing. Currently, you probably heard a lot of people talking about biochar. This is a porous material that will help your microorganisms to have living quarters where they can live and multiply. Also, it will improve water retention and soil aeration. I use about a bag like this per compost pile, and that's probably the most expensive ingredient. It costs about $14. So that's a porous material that you could use in your pile. And again, you mix the pile really well together, and you have to let it process for at least 3 weeks in order to kill all the pathogenic bacteria, especially if you use animal manure. You definitely have to leave it for at least 3 weeks. Another thing, the compost have to cool down completely, otherwise you can burn the roots of your plants, which I have done in the past, unfortunately. You turn the pile every 2 to 3 days in order to provide air to your beneficial microbes. As I call it, this is all-in-one compost, and not only it's very beneficial and feeds my plants, it also saves me time as a gardener, because instead of applying all of those elements separately to my garden, I apply them all in once, maybe about every 2-3 weeks, depending on the temperature and the rains. I hope this will be helpful to you as well. I would like to hear from you what kind of methods, what kind of ingredients you use in your compost and how it benefits your plants. We all grow together as we learn from each other